Here we're going to solve a money problem using a linear system. And our problem is Mike invested $2,500 and part of this amount was at an annual interest rate of 8% while the other part of his total money was invested at 10%. Now after 1 year, the total interest he earned was $245. So what we're going to try and figure out is how much money was invested in each rate. So the first thing I did was went ahead and set up a table just to help us organize our information and to help us create a linear system. So the first part of the given information, we know that he has two investments. One investment is going to be at 8% and one's going to be at 10. So he has two investments. So the first investment, we're going to say let X equal the amount invested at 8%. And his other investment will say let Y equal the amount at 10%. So there we have his two investments represented by two variables, X and Y. The next bit of information that's given to us is the total amount invested. So we know that Mike has invested a total of $2,500. So now we can go ahead and set up an equation. We know that X is one amount and we know that Y is the other. So if we have X plus Y, that's going to equal the total amount he invested, which is $2,500. So part of his money plus the rest of his money will equal the total money. Next bit of information we're given is we know that X amount of dollars is going to be invested at 8%. So the way we can write this is 0.08, which is the decimal form of 8%, times X. The same thing can be done with the Y amount. We know that he invested a Y amount of dollars at 10%. So another way to write that is 0.10, which is the decimal form for 10%, times Y. And the last bit of information given to us is the total amount of interest earned. So we can say total interest equals $245. And taking this interest information, we can go ahead and create an equation which will represent it. So we can have the interest earned at 8% plus the interest earned at 10% is going to equal $245 in total. So here we have our two equations which will make up our linear system. We'll just go ahead and write this at the top. So here we're going to use the substitution method to solve this linear system. And if we remember back to the lesson, the first step is we're going to solve the equation 1 right up here, X plus Y equals 2,500. We're going to solve for X. Here we have X plus Y equals 2,500. We're going to solve for X. So we're going to take our Y, going to move it across the equal sign where it changes from a positive to a negative. So we have X equals a negative Y plus 2,500. So the next step is to substitute this new expression of X into the second equation, and that's going to determine our Y value. So we have 0.08. Now in place of X, we're going to put negative Y plus 2,500 plus 0.10Y equals 245. Next we'll use the distributive property. So we have 0.08 times negative Y, which will be negative 0.08Y. Now we have 0.08 times 2,500, which leaves us with 200 plus 0.10Y equals 245. What we want to do now is collect the like terms. So we're going to have negative 0.08y plus 0.10y equals 245. Now we're going to take our positive 200, move it across the equal sign where it changes from a positive to a negative. It's going to leave us with minus 200. So here we've collected the like terms and continue to solve for y. So we have negative 0.08 plus a positive 0.10 leaves us with positive 0.02. Y will equal 245 minus 200 is 45. Now we're going to isolate y. What we'll do is we'll divide by its coefficient, both sides, cross each other out, leaving us with what we want. Y equals 45 divided by 0.02 is 2,250. So we have just determined the amount invested at 10%, which we found to be 2,250. If we look back at our table, we came up with let y equals the amount invested at 10%. So we just determined what y is, $2,250. Mike invested at 10%. And what's left is now to determine the x value, the amount that he invested at 8%. So we're going to substitute y equals 2,250 into our first equation, x plus y equals 2,500. And that's going to leave us with our x value. So we have x plus 2,250 equals 2,500. What we want to do is solve for x. So we have x, take our 2,250, bring it across the equal sign where it changes from a positive to a negative. Leaves us with x equals 2,500 minus 2,250, and x equals 250. So we've just determined x amount of dollars that Mike invested at 8%. So we have our y and our x should equal a total amount, 2,500, and it does. So let's answer this question. How much money was invested at each rate? Mike invested $2,250 at 10% and $250 at 8%.